In today's video, we have a lot to cover, including the latest trade talk around the Edmonton Oilers. Now that their season is done, lots of speculation on what moves may come next. We have a speculation around the Devils seeking another top goaltender. Plus, we're going to look at further at the Toronto Maple Leafs, discuss some of their trade rumors that's being discussed, and how Austin Matthews actually holds most of the leverage of what we might see. We have some big updates on the Washington Capitals head coach position, the Columbus Blue Jackets head coach position, as well as the Penguins GM role. Plus, we have some potential big news coming tonight in Arizona, and we'll recap the playoffs, Game 7 last night between the Stars and Kraken. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news to cover, so let's dive right in and get started. A couple of things that we could see happen between tonight and the next couple of days. Tonight is expected, probably in the next several hours, we should have an update on the Arizona Coyotes arena situation. The voting deadline is coming right up here. We should possibly find out, unless there was a last-minute surge of votes that have to be tabulated, we might very well find out this evening, somewhere between, anywhere anytime after 8 o'clock Eastern time. So it could be, 8, 8:39, 10, hard to say exactly. But we could find out tonight how the vote went and know if things are going to be looking positive or not. So stay tuned. There likely will be another video on the channel once we have that news. But today's the day for that. The bidding on the Ottawa Senators closed yesterday. We're finding out more information today. There was actually 4 bids, including groups from Michael Landauer, the Kimmel brothers, Steve Aspilopoulos, as well as the Nico Sparks group. And it's also been revealed that it is a possibility, not a foregone conclusion, when Ian Mendes of The Athletic made mention in his article today that he believes there's still a chance that Ryan Reynolds may join the winning bid and still be a part of this ownership group after all. More likely than not, he would side and kind of work with either the Landauer group or the Kimmel group. At least that seems to make more sense given the amount of celebrities already associated with the Sparks group. And Landauer and Kimmel groups are kind of both considered to be the front runners at this point. So it kind of makes sense. It's believed that the decision to withdraw from the bid with the Remington group that he was associated with wasn't really entirely all his idea, more so his partners. So that might mean that he was kind of disappointed and would still like to possibly be involved. Apparently he's been, considering and weighing out his options for the better part of a year, which would have been, ideally, not too long after Eugene Melnyk passed away. It was, most people kind of assumed in the not too distant future that the team would become for sale. Obviously, with his ties to the city, it sounds like something he's interested in, and doesn't mean that he's completely out of it. We may not hear much more on Reynolds for a little bit once we know the group that has the preferred bidder status, once they're closer to closing the deal, would likely be when we might get confirmation of his involvement or not, or what have you. But just for Sens fans out there who are disappointed by that news, there is a chance that he could still be involved. Of course, last night we had the big Game 7 in the Western Conference to have the Dallas Stars defeat the Seattle Kraken in a tightly contested 2-1 game. Obviously, the Kraken are now eliminated. Dallas moves on to play in the Western Final against the Vegas Golden Knights. We saw Rupe Hintz score late in the second. The first period was scoreless, and then Wyatt Johnson scored, I think it was 7 or 8 minutes into the third period. It was a beauty goal. The youngster ended up getting the series-clinching goal. He's had quite the rookie season and had a big impact on this team. And then late in the third, very late, with 19, 20 seconds to go, Oliver Bjorkstrand scored for the Kraken to make it, close and interesting for the final 20 seconds. But at the end of the day, they were not able to get anything further. Jake Ottinger had a good bounce-back game, only giving up that one late goal, just missed getting on the shutout. But Dallas certainly played a stronger game as well and didn't give up as much. I think the Kraken only finished with 23 or 24 shots. So certainly a good effort on both sides, but I will say a little bit superior effort for the Stars. So the Western and Eastern Conference Finals will kick off on Thursday and Friday. So Carolina versus Florida on Thursday. Dallas versus Vegas on Friday. So sometime probably tomorrow on Wednesday, expect a video from me with a preview of each of those conference final championships. Now, as we get into a lot of the speculation around the entire league, we have lots of rumors around the head coaching and GM opening positions, as well as some trade talk. Before we jump into all that, though, there was a quick signing as well. The Maple Leafs have signed a goalie prospect, Vyacheslav Peksa, who's a 20-year-old Russian goalie prospect who was a 6th-round pick in the 2021 NHL draft. So he gets his 3-year entry-level contract to come over to North America and join the Maple Leafs organization. Now, we'll start with the Washington Capitals and their head coaching position. We did get word today that they have requested permission to speak with Spencer Carberry, the assistant coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, he's got ties to the organization from his past, obviously previously worked with them, and he also has a great record as an assistant coach, looked upon as almost like an offensive or power play type specialist. So certainly a guy that many expect at some point at least will get a head coaching position. Hard to say exactly when that is. We don't know at this point if the Maple Leafs will grant permission or not. Of course, as we've talked about extensively here the last couple of days, all kinds of speculation over the Maple Leafs and what's going on there. We don't know if there's going to be a coaching change or if Kyle Dubas is even back. We're still waiting for all that confirmation, which should kind of be clarified over the next couple of days, I would think. Once we know the status of Kyle Dubas, I think that'll determine the status of the coaching staff, and then we can kind of go from there and see, because if they decide to clean house on the coaching staff, well, then they'll be able to be available. But at the same time, I would not suspect that if they do decide on a coaching change, it may not be the entire coaching staff. I would think Carberry would probably be a guy who they'd want to hang on to. It might even be a candidate that for them most likely to fill the head coach position if Sheldon Keefe isn't back. But either way, the Caps have requested permission to speak with him. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but no shocker that they definitely have interest there. The Columbus Blue Jackets have also interviewed a variety of people. It is possible they may go with another internal candidate, Pascal Vincent. There is some speculation that he might be a front runner, but they have talked to some very well-experienced head coaches, including Peter Laviolette and even Mike Babcock as well. So it's quite possible they couldn't, go with a much more experienced head coach in that regard, which I kind of thought might be the direction they go in after bringing in Brad Larson and then letting him go. I thought they might want to go a different route, more experience. We'll have to wait and see. Lots of names associated with the Pittsburgh Penguins GM job as they apparently now have completed round 1 of interviews and are moving on to round 2 for the next phase. But some familiar names that were in the mix include former Montreal Canadiens general manager Marc Bergevin. He's in the mix there, and I think to some degree kind of considered, I wouldn't say he's a front runner, but he's certainly somebody that's very likely. But then they also have Peter Chiarelli. I would be surprised if Chiarelli ends up being the guy, but he is in the mix. Jason Botterill, of course, no surprise there. Currently an assistant GM with the Kraken, but a former assistant GM with the Penguins, with a long time working with their management team before getting the GM job in Buffalo, which of course didn't last too long. I was there for a couple of years, was let go and then ended up working as an assistant again in Seattle. So of course he knows that organization very well. It was obviously heavily involved with a lot of those players in the past, so it makes sense. And another name linked to the Penguins in the past too, Jason Carmanos, who worked a lot with Jim Rutherford. He's in the mix there, same with Eric Tulsky, another name that's widely expected to get a GM opportunity at some point. And then we just got word as well from Dan Krajinski, the Pittsburgh Hockey Now, because he's not the only one reporting it, but he's the one I've seen the info from. But he mentioned that it's getting out there, so he wanted to kind of put out what he had for info that former Coyotes GM John Chayka is also very much in the mix for the GM job and is certainly being heavily considered. I mean, we know the Fenway Group is a group that we rely heavily upon a lot of different data and analytics, and we know that's right up Chayka's alley in an area that he specializes in, which is kind of what got him into that level of an NHL role at such a young age. So certainly no shocker that they'd have interest in him. I know it's something that it's believed that he's been heavily interested in getting back into an NHL management type job for some time. So it's lots of names, plenty of which have previous GM experience, some of which do not. So they have lots of guys to pick from there. So I'll be really curious to see which direction they go in. I don't really know that amongst all those that they have a favorite at this point. They're all going to have different degrees of experience and different things that they can offer. So we'll have to wait and see how all that works out. Now, of course, with the Edmonton Oilers recently being eliminated, they had their media day today as well, talking about the end of the season and how things finished up. Obviously, lots of players and everybody disappointed with how things finished. Thought they could certainly do better than what they ended up doing. Lots of debriefing now from NHL media and Oilers reporters looking at what might come next for the team. Certainly lots to talk about in that regard. I don't think we're going to see the drastic potential changes that we might see in some organizations. I know I see a lot of Leaf people, a lot of Leaf fans on social media talking about how the Leafs tend to get a harder time for not succeeding in the playoffs, where this Oilers team has had a lot of players there for some time now as well with the same sort of stumbles. But I will say this, they have had more playoff success in the long haul than the Leafs had. And they do have a lot more players that haven't been there as long. They've certainly added a lot in the last couple of years. Hyman and Kane, Evan Bouchard still quite young. There are lots. Obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl have been there for some time now, but I guess they've done more changes and they have had some deeper runs, which I think is why they get a little bit more rope. And based on what we're hearing, like I talked about yesterday, there is a possibility that Ken Holland may move into a president role and not be the GM anymore, and they may pass it along to Steve Staios. That's a possibility, but either way, a couple of names to kind of watch as far as changes go for the Oilers. We know that they still have a few more years of McDavid and Draisaitl, but obviously one of the big contracts they need to take care of this offseason is Evan Bouchard. Of course, after trading Tyson Barrie, that Ekholm for Barrie trade was quite substantial, and elevating Bouchard, especially on the power play, is going to be interesting in how they get his contract on, because he is a pending RFA. Obviously, Bouchard at this point is not going to get any cheaper as time goes along. He did a really good job on the power play, really elevated his point totals. So that's going to be one of the more critical moves that they make this offseason. So they may need to make some moves to kind of clear some space, and they also may need to move some players just to kind of change things up. So a couple of names that we're keeping an eye on. One is Kailer Yamamoto. Yamamoto has been inconsistent up and down through the Oilers. I mean, if you take a look at his body work, it's expected. And really, when Jesse Puljujarvi was moved earlier, those were the only two guys that was really reasonable for them to move on the roster. And Yamamoto, I think it's fair to say, he did find ways to contribute in the playoffs. He did play, some good physical minutes and things, especially considering his size, forechecky and whatnot. But he was not contributing to the offense much at all. He did have a really big goal, obviously at one point, but they need more, and they need more consistency. So I would not be shocked to see Yamamoto swapped out for a different player who can maybe make better use of the offensive time. Obviously, they did not get the offensive contributions in the playoffs from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He, after a career season, disappeared. Kane and Hyman didn't produce. They did produce some, but it didn't produce to a level that you'd expect based on what they're capable of, based on what they've done in past playoffs or regular season. McDavid and Draisaitl were amazing as usual. Bouchard had a good, real solid run in the playoffs. So some of their depth kind of did as well. When you look at the depth of the bottom six, to me, I am okay with how a lot of those guys performed. To me, it's your upper players. It's not your McDavid and Draisaitl's, but it's their top six supporting cast to me that were the most disappointing. I said Nugent-Hopkins, Hyman, Cade, and I'm sure there were some injuries mixed in there that were hampering things, but to me, those were the guys that didn't get it done the most, that had the biggest impact on them not having more success. Obviously, getting key goaltending at key times, better saves here and there would have been helpful as well defensively. They got some work to do, which brings us to another player to watch, which is likely going to be a guy like Cody Ceci, maybe Brett Kulak, but to be honest, Kulak I thought played relatively well, but they need to find out and determine if they feel Philip Broberg is ready for a full-time roster spot next year, which is going to likely have to move somebody out. It would also help them with a cap perspective, because obviously Broberg would make far less money than a more experienced defenseman, so we give them some relief and create a spot for another one of the younger players as well. So certainly look for some guys like that to likely be the most likely candidates to be moved out, and we'll see where things go from there. That's about all we know for roster changes. And then, of course, there was the Holland rumor that surfaced in the last day or so as well. Of course, look for New Jersey to possibly be on the lookout for a goaltender. We've seen them have good success this year, make huge leaps and bounds in the regular season, win a round in the playoffs, but lose, in round two. And the Carolina Hurricanes, I wouldn't say they beat them easily, but they certainly didn't put up quite the fight that they thought they could. Goaltending was not great. Vitek Vandershan and Akira Schmid, they were both in and out, or both getting pulled. They were not living up to expectations. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that Schmid looks like he might be the best candidate to be goalie of the future. But there was some information in an article suggesting that if Connor Hellebuyck in Winnipeg becomes available, that New Jersey will definitely be a team to watch. We know that they're not afraid to make big moves. So there is that. We know they've done this before. They obviously made the big Timo Meier trade. We don't know what's going to happen with Meier while return. We also don't know what's going to happen with Jesper Bratt. Both Bratt and Meier need new contracts, and a lot of people feel that they're not going to be able to keep both guys. So could one of them be treated for a top-notch goalie? Clearly, I think they're going to likely part ways with Mackenzie Blackwood. That will not be surprising at all. But this is a type of deal, too, where Winnipeg could get a goalie return, which I don't know that they would have interest in Blackwood, but I know they probably would have interest on a guy like Vanecek. Vanecek is still young enough that they might be willing to take a chance on him being their starting goaltender. I know he had a tough time in the playoffs, but he did have a really good regular season. Schmid did as well. I just don't see the Devils parting with Schmid in that case. Obviously, he could be working in a tandem with Hellebuyck for the next year or two while Connor is under contract. And then if the Hellebuyck moves on from there, well, they could possibly be running him, hand over the reins to Schmid to be the full-time starter at that point. Hard to say, but maybe a guy like Vanecek could be part of a deal. I'm not saying it would be 1-for-1. It wouldn't be for sure. But you factor in, it could actually be a much bigger trade. You put in Hellebuyck and maybe something else. And then, of course, on the New Jersey side, you could have a goalie like Vanecek and maybe a guy like Meyer or Bratt, who they could desperately need forwards for, because they're going to be looking to move out some other guys like Scheifele, Wheeler, possibly being dealt. Dubois might be dealt. So they're going to need top 6 forwards. So to me, it makes some good sense. Hard to say exactly how the deal would be constructed, but that they would have what each other is kind of looking for, and it makes a lot of sense that they would be good trade partners. So certainly look for Jersey, maybe try to pounce if Hellebuyck is for sure going to be made available or not. Now in Toronto as well, we do have a little bit more of an idea of what players are likely done. That list is going to include goalie Matt Murray. Don't expect him to return. Likely the Leafs either consider a buyout, which is less likely, or they basically pay a team with an incentive to take him off their hands with the final year of his contract. Michael Bunting, very likely to not coming back. I think that they will try. They'll probably have some discussions. But the part 2 that was kind of telling in a way is they had no contract discussions up until this point. Bunting said that in his season-ending interview, that there has been no discussion. So obviously that doesn't look good, and I think it's probably a case where they know they probably can't afford him. Justin Hall, very much done. Alex Kerfoot, likely done as well. Now some other guys that are not for sure not coming back, but the odds are against it because they're likely going to test free agency and might get more money elsewhere, which would include Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Cherry, possibly Zach Aston-Reese. I'm not sure how they completely feel about Aston-Reese. Maybe he's back, but I would think it's less likely. Better chance that they re-sign RFA goalie Ilya Samsonov. Probably a guy like David Kampf makes sense that he could likely get a deal done as well. Now, lots of trade rumors that we've talked about as far as the core 4 guys, the core 4 forwards go. I think we can all settle on the fact that the odds of an Austin Matthews trade, extremely slim, not happening. John Tavares, not happening because he's got a full no-move clause. If he had less protection and they could trade him without his agreeing to it, I would think they would explore that more, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So obviously that leaves us with Marner and Nylander, but I want to talk about the fact that kind of show you how Matthews actually has all the leverage. Now, of course, step 1 in all this process is the next couple of days, we should get clarity and confirmation that Kyle Dubas is either back or he's not. If he's not back, they need to hire a new general manager. And to be completely honest, I don't think they go outside of the organization if that happens. I think they promote Brandon Pridham. That's my take. They don't have a lot of time. I don't know that they were really expecting Dubas to possibly walk, so that kind of probably caught people by surprise. So they're not prepared for that, and I don't know that they're going to want to spend a lot of time doing a search when they have some critical parts of the offseason that need to be taken care of here in the not too distant future. So to me, it makes most sense that if they do have a scenario where they find out that Dubas decides that this isn't for him anymore and he needs to take a break, that Pridham is promoted internally. That's my opinion on that. But step 1 is they need to know who the GM is. Step 2, they need to start having conversations around the Austin Matthews extension. Obviously, they need to know what his number is going to be. They need to know what kind of term he'll accept. And they need to start working around things of that nature, because if that is your primary obstacle here, is to get Matthews signed on another longer-term deal, which many believe that it's not going to be 7 or 8 years. A lot of NHL insiders feel that he only wants a 3 or 4 year range, so he can cash in yet again and be a UFA when he's, by the time he's like 30, 31 years old. So, that's when you're probably going to hear more of the, assuming they don't have a cup to their resume by then, you're probably more likely have a better chance of him maybe leaving, but that's still very premature at that point. But at the end of the day, Matthews has said all the right things that he wants to stay, but how much does he want? What's his dollar figure? What's his term? Can they make that work? Is it reasonable? And obviously, he's going to want to talk before he signs anything. It's not going to be just about, here's what I want for money, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, here you go. Oh, okay, it's signed, done. It's not going to be that simple. This guy's going to want to know from Kyle Dubas or whoever the GM is, what is the plan? What changes are you looking to make? How do you think we can get to be better and have a better chance of winning a Stanley Cup? And he's going to want to know all that. And to be honest, if he says, like, I'll sign this contract if you agree to these terms, but I want to play with Marner and Nylander. If you trade them, I'm not signing. Not to say he would do that, but it's possible he could do that. And he knows, and he'd be smart enough to know, and along with his agent, that he would have that kind of control and that kind of influence over what they do. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't want to lose Matthews. And if trading one of his longtime teammates is very much against what he wants, and if that's really going to ruffle his feathers, they may not want to do that. All of a sudden, they might be a little bit handcuffed on what changes they do make, even though Kyle Dubas made it completely clear and known that he's willing to accept and do anything. Like a lot of people believe here, based on what he said and all the reports of them, that it's going to be Marner or Nylander. Like a big trade involving one of those two guys likely goes down. But it's just not that simple. It's all they just make a trade to make a trade. They have to find a trade. It takes a second team or a third team to make the everything work, and it has to make sense for both sides. So it's not like it's going to happen tomorrow where you just wake up and be like, oh, the news, they traded Marner. No, like they need to find, if they can find a deal like Florida did last year, which took a lot of time to consummate, then maybe it happens. But at the end of the day, Nylander and Marner may not be traded if Matthews doesn't want them to be, if it means them staying for him to sign. So he very well could kind of, get him whether you don't want, if it means, him signing. So we'll have to wait and see. But Austin Matthews, even though he's not technically a UFA, he's a year out, is going to have a ton of power and a ton of say over the direction of this team, whether everybody wants to realize it or admit it. And that's just the bottom line. At the end of the day, with star players like that are going to be commanding top dollar, and you don't want to lose them. You have to give them what they want. And if that's something that's important to him, it could really complicate what trades they do make and how this team changes or doesn't change moving forward. So we'll see. A lot of people still think Marner or Nylander will be the one to go. But what does Austin think about all this? We'll have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.